now let's investigate the e4 d6, which is called Pirc defense. I would say, this is one of those openings where black is not at least immediately fighting for the center. And but definitely from all those, quite limited amount of openings where black doesn't put very quickly one of his pawns in the center, this is definitely the best one. Black has a concept which is not really trying to fight for equality right from the opening, but more to get a complicated game with counter chances, maybe objectively, of course, giving up the center, probably not enough to get a totally equal game, but there are a lot of counter chances in all those positions. Quite big amount of choice white has against this opening, but in all of those lines, black always has some way to get a complicated position and to play for a win. There is no way really for white at this opening just to sterilize the game. Also, very often what happens that this e4 d6 Pirc repertoire comes together with the King's Indian against the closed openings, d4 against d4. So then it's a similar type of a game. Of course, there are lots of differences and nuances if white has a knight on c3 and pawn on c2, or with a pawn on c4. But all in all, the general concept is quite similar. So I would advise you, if you are playing King's Indian, for instance, against d4 with black, maybe to try to play Pirc and other way around. If you're already playing Pirc against e4, it makes some sense to study King's Indian. Because the spirit of the game is quite similar in those openings. So let's go one by one. Let's check all the possible options for white, and there is quite a number of different setups with trying to play sharp, and even trying to make long castle and attack, or immediately taking the center, for instance, with f4, or just playing a solid, quiet positional game with knight f3, bishop e2, or g3, bishop g2. So first I would like to talk about this g6 move order. Actually, it is interesting. It gives black some additional options, which are, again, I don't know if better or worse, or more or less similar to the main lines with d6, but it's definitely worth having it in your repertoire if you're playing Pirc already, to be able, so to say, to start with g6 as well, because it might be interesting against some of the systems. Against others, it doesn't really make difference, but still there are some nuances. The only drawback of starting with g6, the real drawback, is that after d4, bishop g7, white can play c4. So white can transpose now to the King's Indian. So definitely, if you choose to play g6 on move 1, you have to be ready for King's Indian as well. But if, again, you are a King's Indian player against d4, then that is not a problem for you. And then g6 makes sense, because after d4, bishop g7, white, let's say if he already played d4, logically, probably he wants to play a regular Pirc with a knight on c3. Because, but who knows? It depends. Of course, sometimes a person, he plays both e4 and d4, and he's happy to play King's Indian, so then quite likely he would go c4 in this position. Otherwise, let's say if he plays knight c3, then the idea of black is to play d6. And that is mainly against the most the sharpest system which white has against Pirc. Because, for instance, if white is just playing knight f3 followed by bishop e2, probably anyway the best what black can do is to go knight f6 and transpose to the main line of Pirc against this system. But, for instance, if bishop e3, this is one of the systems I'm going to show you, a very serious and dangerous one. Then, for instance, here black can try to postpone knight f6, because knight on g8 is in a way protecting the h6 square, so it doesn't let white exchange those bishops so easily. And then he starts his play on the queen side immediately, like this: queen d2, b5. Let's say f3, for example, yeah, knight d7. As an example, I give you this line: bishop b7, king b1, rook c8, and then followed by c5. So you see, knight is for the moment is on g8, because also, with a knight on f6, sometimes white might have some central breaks with e5, and also bishop h6 idea. Yeah. So here you are stopping both of that and then trying to play c5, for instance, g4. Let's say, yeah, if white is just trying to get his play on the king side, c5, and it's perfectly playable for black. So that is the idea against this. Also, I doubt bishop g5 system, which also makes a lot of sense here. It's already a bit, maybe it's still possible, but it's a little bit like hitting the air, yeah? Playing bishop g5, so maybe black can develop his play with c6 and so on, yeah, queen a5, maybe even, etc. And the main thing is that after f4, which is, as you will see later on, it's a very, very dangerous system against Pirc. So here you can also start with a6, knight f3, b5. Looks pretty dubious. Frankly, I've never really believed in it. Yeah, it looks so dangerous to play for black. But according to theory and even computer games, situation is not too bad here for black. I mean, it's playable. Again, as always in chess and in those openings where you don't put immediately your pawn in the center, as with black. Of course, if white is extremely well prepared, then he can pose problems. I'm sure that white can pose problems here, but otherwise you can get a very interesting game and actually quite a sharp position with counter chances. For instance, if bishop d3, I think knight d7 is the most accurate move, trying to push c5, and e5. Actually, I think it's computers. According to computer games, it's a main choice. And now, for instance, if bishop b7, bishop d3, knight d7, castles, for example, e6, and then trying to go knight e7, and the position, of course, black is lacking development a bit, and white has initiative in the center, but black has lots of breaks like c5, etc., and it seems to be not so clear, this position. And also after e5, for instance, now maybe black can develop his knight to h6, followed by castle, and then he controls he controls those f5 pushes, etc., and maybe trying to play f6 or c5 at some point. So it's worth investigating this g6 move order, but anyway, I would like to mainly present you Pirc via a more traditional move order, which is d6, d4, knight f6. Well, here knight c3 is by far the main move, but actually f3 is a serious option here for white. The only thing is it's not so popular, because this f3 is connected with with white trying to play c4 later. Let's say after g6, okay, white can do same kind of things, so maybe bishop e3, knight c3, but then white to play f3. So usually the white's idea is to play c4 and to move to this Kinsindian Zamish variation with f3. But again, as I've mentioned already, if white already plays on the first move e4, then it's quite likely, they don't want to play Kinsindian already. They want to stick to the e4 repertoire. But in general, f3 is a very serious option because after e5, I've played, by the way, myself long time ago in Bill Interzonal 1993. I beat Jonathan Spielman with it. He played e5 against me, and white can, of course, go d5 and get followed by c4 with this King's Indian type of play. But d5, this endgame, that's what I played against Spielman also, bishop c4, king 8, bishop e3. I think it's quite pleasant for white. It's slightly better, and black has to suffer and to play very accurately to slowly to equalize and make a draw, which is usually not the idea of the players who are playing Pirc. Therefore, e5, I wouldn't recommend you if you already played d4, d6. Then better to play e5 on move 1 if you want to equalize. But maybe c5 is another option here, and white can play dc, then there are queen a5 check, for example, or d5, then maybe g6. So in any case, this is a move. f3 is a move I can really recommend you if you are playing white and you are happy with King's Indian f3. Zemish variation, and with black, definitely you need to know what are you planning to do against f3. So if you are not playing King's Indian, playing Pirc but not playing King's Indian, then maybe you should try to choose c5 as your repertoire against f3. But again, most of the time white plays knight c3. And then the Pirc defense is g6. So you see, it's, why black is not immediately fighting for the center. He wants to develop quickly, even though in some lines he changes his mind, according to white's play. And then to start counterattacking the center with c5 and having this bishop on g7 on the diagonal. So a typical King's Indian play, but of course, with quite some difference, which mainly due to the fact that the pawn is not on c4. So in King's Indian, very often, most of the lines, white sooner or later starts to play on the queen side. Because pawn is on c4, and then after e5 he pushes d5, and then before c5, so all this play. Of course, with the pawn on c2, it's already less efficient. There are not so many prospects on the queen side, to push pawns on the queen side. So quite often now white tries to play in the center or even on the king side in this position. So, many systems here. White has many systems. I would divide it into positional systems. So again, for players who are listening to this lesson and who want to study it with white, there is a conceptual choice. Let's say you prefer some quiet positional game with full control, then probably you should go for knight f3, bishop e2 systems, for instance, or g3, bishop g2. I personally prefer the first, but also g3 system is very solid, very positional play. Or you want to play aggressive, then probably you should go for bishop g5 or bishop e3 systems, then followed very often with queen d2, long castle, and sharp play where white, still controls the center and has a slightly better prospects, but black has his own counter chances. And the third option is, so to say, for theoreticians, I would say. So it's a very direct way, playing here f4, trying to take the center, knight f3, followed by bishop d3, sometimes e5. So a very principled way of playing. But that requires a very, very good opening preparation. You need to analyze it with a computer. You need to know some lines. But f4 is, in my opinion, probably objectively the most dangerous system against Pirc. And also for black players, if you are playing Pirc, you really need to be sure that you are that you have something in mind against f4. Otherwise, it's easy just to get much worse. And because white has a quite significant central dominance after f4. So those are three three options. So let's start with positional ideas. First one, let's start with G3. A very logical, solid way. Karpov, he used to like playing like this, and many other positional players. So bishop goes to G2, overprotecting the pawn on E4. White has a good control in the center, but it's Black also can get his own counter chances. I played a bit Pirc defense myself, and frankly, I was never really afraid of G3, even though I understand that White might have a small plus here also, but that's not something which is scaring Pirc players usually. So G3, bishop G7, bishop G2, castles, knight E2. So White is developing his pieces. And now there are different systems here. It's a matter of choice. I think here Black has quite an interesting choice depending on what type of position you prefer with Black. First of all, there is a C5 move, which is maybe a bit underestimated. It considers to be not too good because of d takes C5. Because if d5 in the system of knight f3 bishop e2, I will show you that d5 is pretty strong there. But here the problem is that it's much easier for Black to get his b5 before counterplay on the queen side, and so d5 is not so dangerous in this position. But after c5, dc5 is considered to be a kind of refutation that White is having a nice plus here, but it's not so easy. I mean, f6, you can try to analyze this position. With Black, it might be that with accurate play, Black can equalize in this endgame, and then c5 would be a very playable move. But in any case, since again, usually Pirc players, they prefer something more sharp, playing with more pieces on the board, not to change queens too early. So that's why c5 is not so popular. I myself, a couple of times, I think I had blitz games, I liked to play this system, knight a6, castle c5. So the idea is that, okay, if d5, my idea is to try to go rook b8, knight c7 to push b5. dc5 is not so dangerous already because I take with a knight, I don't let this e5. And usually White is playing something like this, h3 and takes, something like that. Bishop d7, rook c8. Knight on a6, of course, is a little bit, I would definitely prefer it on c6, but it also has prospects going to c5. So complicated position, perfectly playable for Black. Again, maybe White has a bit of a advantage here, but nothing terrible, very playable. And another way of more classical of playing for Black is just to play e5, castle c6. Usually White is playing a4, very typical here to stop sooner or later Black organizing his counterplay with b5. And now you can put the knight on d7, for instance, but I prefer knight a6. I think it has more dynamics here, especially after White already played a4 and you have this nice b4 square for your knight. So let's say if knight d7, usually what White is doing is, developing pieces like this, control of the center. Let's say b6, g4, bishop b7, knight g3, and then followed by f4 at some point. Very tense position. Black has all kind of ed c5, d5, a6, b5 ideas, but White also has his trumps. Now, for instance, he is probably threatening g5. So that I would quite like with White, but knight a6 maybe is more interesting. So h3 is a very useful prophylactic move in this system, kind of necessary because just to have bishop e3 quietly, queen d2, that there is no knight g4. And now, for instance, e4, knight takes d4, knight b4 or rook e8 first, a5, rook e8. So this position, I looked at the computer statistics here, computer games. It's close to 50%. So which means that even if White again has a bit of maybe a slightly more comfortable position, but Black is definitely having his counter chances. So all in all, G3 is a solid system for White, but no more than that. If already you want to play very positional and solid, I would already recommend you with White to play knight f3, bishop g7, bishop e2. I think this system is quite unpleasant for black, because he doesn't have so many active choices, here. And white has a lot of control on his position here. So let's say castles, and there are many different moves for black. So actually not so easy to get e5, because, for example, if you play knight d7, I think already e5 is very dangerous. Knight e8, bishop f4, and the white is better here. Then what else? c5 is already not a great option, because d5 is very unpleasant and difficult to get b5. There are a lot of games on this type of position in the system with bishop e2, and it seems that black is experiencing quite some problems here. One of the most well-known games, for example, here is game Karpov-Korchnoi from the Baguio match 78, and Viktor Korchnoi, he just equalized the score. It was 5-5, and they played until the 6 victories. So I decided maybe that it's time already to win the match and to play for a win with black. So he went for this, rather dubious line, which is again playable, but maybe not on this such a high level. And got totally destroyed here by Karpov with his very typical Karpovian style, very logical and very consistent play. He just developed his pieces, developed the pressure in the center, pushed e5, and basically, Korchnoi didn't have a chance in this game, and so Karpov won this, maybe one of the most important games of his whole chess career, and kept his title with it. So yeah, this is not something I would recommend you. Objectively, again, depends very much on the level you play. Of course, in internet blitz, you can try it, but no more than that, in my opinion. Then the main line here is c6. There is some move bishop g4 here. I'm not a big fan of this move. It looks very strange. Let's say bishop e3, knight c6, and trying to play e5. In any case, it is really trying to play for equality. I mean, no real chance to get some counter play in the near future to get real winning chances. And also, I'm not sure it equalizes objectively. I think white has h3 here, and usually black takes and tries to play e5. But also now d5 is a move, or another move is knight e2, if I remember well, here. But also, I'm not sure that black is doing so well after d5, and usually he's playing something like this: takes on f3, knight e5, bishop e2, c6, but still f4, knight bd7. It's not too bad for black, definitely playable, but normally must be comfortable for white. He has two bishops and a certain control in the center, so bishop g4 so it's not to my taste. So c6 is the main move, but I would like to mention for the players who like to play Pirc with black that maybe a6 is an interesting try. Actually, I've played it myself also in a quite well-known game in the last round of the candidates tournament in London 2013, when due to circumstances I had to play for a win with black in the last round against Ivanchuk, and decided to go for this Pirc and trying to get into murky waters. Actually, I lost the game at the end of the day. Vasily played extremely well and didn't really give me any winning chances. And I somehow overstepped the risk limit and lost the game. But in any case, a6 is an interesting try. Actually, I see now that in Blitz, at least in Blitz or even in Rapid, even Magnus Carlsen played it actually against me, I think, in a Blitz game. And also Dubov is playing it lately. It makes sense because e5 immediately is not so dangerous, and somehow black wants to get b5, bishop b7, and in case if rook e1, I think b5 here is a bit dubious because of e5. You have to watch out, of course, for e5 in such positions. But then some knight c6 ideas are possible, trying to go e5 or b5, very flexible system. if I remember well, I think Ivanchuk played against me something like bishop g5, maybe, or some move like that. Always, of course, playable also. And the idea that if a4, a very typical response against a6 in general in Pirc, then black can try to play knight c6. His idea is that after d5 he can get his knight to b4, and then trying to fight against the center via e6 or c6, depending on the circumstances. So a6 is an interesting move which you might investigate. But the main line is c6, and now black wants to get queen c7, e5 has to watch out for white pushing e5, but now it's a bit early. So a4 is a usual reaction, because you can, if bishop e3, first of all, you can start playing queen c7. In any case, it's maybe even immediately b5 is more logical. Let's say a3, bishop b7. Normally in this system, if you are playing it white, you should really try to play after c6, a4, not to let black so easily gain space on the queen side, because that is what he's in general trying to do here. So once he manages to get b5, he's having a very decent game. I mean, I think black is not worse here. So a4 is, I would say, is strategically is a must in these positions. Then black is playing queen c7 and trying to play e5. What is white usually doing against it is quite often he tries to find the right moment to play d takes e5, and then trying to play on the queen side, having pawn on a5, and just a quiet positional game. By the way, conceptually, I mean, I would say you can study my game against Ivanchuk, I mean, how he played against me. In general, this is the way to play in this system with white, is just to have very positional play, control on the position, and trying to get some advance on the queen side. So here I would say bishop e3 is a logical move, because knight g4 is not leading anywhere. I mean, so there is no need to start with h3 yet, because you can play bishop g5 and then followed by h3. If h6, you can go to h4 and then h3. So black doesn't gain much jumping with a knight to g4. So let's say bishop e3, because it gives some additional options for white, not hurrying with h3. So the most logical, of course, for black is to play e5. Sometimes black tries to play knight bd7 followed by b6, bishop b7, then maybe a6, b5. That's queen d2, for example, b6, something like that. But yeah, it's playable. It's not too bad, but a bit dangerous, because for example, white, it's very also one of the typical ideas in this variation is to change those bishops, which limits black's counterplay quite significantly, even if, of course, white also losing a bit of time with it. But I also like this very strange idea. I want to point your attention to it. Knight g5 here, for example, I find it very interesting, because now white just wants to play f4, e5, f5, to start a very direct assault. For example, bishop b7, f4 looks quite dangerous, because e5 is coming. And after knight g5, e5 instead of bishop b7, then, for instance, d5, if knight e5, rook a d1, there are some problems with the d6 pawn. If d5, rook a d1, you see it's quite difficult to get rid of the knight on g5. I mean, only by means of h6, for example, but then maybe white can develop very quickly even some play with f4 or f3, knight f2. He has the control on the d line, and very interesting way of playing for white, not easy to deal with. So knight g5, is an interesting move. But normally black is playing e5, and now, there is always this ed4. You have to watch out playing white or black, especially white. This system, you have to watch out for ed4, rook e8. This idea that attacking the pawn on e4. So that's why, for example, h3, I think here is not a great move, because black can already take knight d4, rook e8, and you're not comfortable defending the pawn on e4 because, of course, f3. If you play f3, first of all, there is directly d5 here, but in any case, and definitely not with h3. And if white, for instance, trying to protect the pawn with bishop f3, then knight d7 comes, knight c5, knight d5. Black has a lot of counterplay. So on e5, I would rather, play d takes e5 immediately, d takes e5, and now a5 is a logical move. Maybe also possible to activate the bishop c4, but a5, and this position, again, it's pretty much depends on tempos, because if black manages to develop everything, let's say rook d8, knight d7, knight f8, knight e6, trying to jump to d4, he will have a very nice position. But not easy, because white has a certain development advantage. And for instance, there are some typical ideas. After knight d7, you can just play even queen d2, followed by rook d1, let's say rook d8, rook d1, then get into d6. Another typical idea under some circumstances, for example, to play knight d2 and trying to get the knight to d6. So I would say, knight h5 maybe looks quite logical to put them to get the knight to f4. But now queen d2, and strangely enough, let's say if rook d8, white can just play queen c1. Don't ask me why, but I guess the idea is that in this type of position, there is knight g5 starts to be threatening, and there is some issue with the pawn on f7, potentially. And knight f4, rook fd1, for example. And again, you can take on e2, queen takes e2, and if you just manage to get your knight somewhere here, black has no problems at all, but it's not easy to manage, because how to develop your pieces, to get, and white probably starts knight d2, knight c4 before play. All in all, anyway, I just give you a very general idea about this position. There are lots of games, of course, lots of different ways of playing for both sides. But I would say that to summarize this knight f3 bishop e2 system, I like it with both colors. Strangely enough, I quite like this type of play with white against Pirc, but also playing Pirc with black, it's not really the system I would be terribly scared of. But again, if you are a player of a classical style, you want to have things under control, you need, I think it's a good system to choose with white, but of course some more work needs to be done, to study the theory. But that is a system. Also, what is good about the system that you can play it against any move order, against first g6 or first d6. If you want, you have it. But again, it's not a refutation, so to say, of Pirc. So now let's move to the kind of aggressive systems with white. So I would say first bishop g5, bishop e3. So I would say positional aggressive system, and then f4, which is a tactical aggressive system. So bishop e3 is much more popular than bishop g5, even though I'm not so sure why, because bishop g5 makes, it has its point, because sometimes bishop is more active on g5 and making it more difficult for black to push e5 because of this pin. So interesting system, maybe a bit underestimated. So for me, I'm not certain, even if statistics of playing bishop e3 or bishop g5 is much in the, pretty seriously into favor of bishop e3. I'm not quite sure bishop g5 is any worse than bishop e3. And I actually played it once or twice myself also against Pirc. So now bishop g7. There is always, you will see also against bishop e3 system, there is always a choice. Sometimes it's better to keep the bishop on f8 for some moment. Just because the very important idea which you need to know playing those systems with either color is that white very often, sooner or later, playing queen d2 and then bishop h6, trying to exchange these bishops. So that's why it makes sense for black not to hurry developing the bishop on g7, just in order to, after bishop h6, to take on h6, not to lose a tempo. So c6 is an interesting way of playing. White maybe can start to play f4 also here, but normally queen d2, let's say b5, bishop d3, kind of logical play, knight d7, f4, maybe bishop g7, knight f3, a very tense position on the board, similar to the main line after bishop g7. So, and let's say bishop g7, I personally played myself queen d2 here, I think against Morozevich many years ago in classical chess. But maybe f4 is actually much less common move, but it is very interesting. So basically, now White is trying to play the same idea, trying to have a full control on the center, but first he develops the bishop on g5, where it is more active. A very interesting move, but queen d2 is the main theory. And now, again, castles is, to me, it looks a bit dubious because, of course, if bishop h6, black can maybe try immediately to play e5, but maybe after castle, white can start with long castle, followed by bishop h6, h4. Black has his counter chances, but it's very easy to get mated here quickly. H4, h5. Of course, black will start his b5 before play, but when analyzing this Pirc and playing it with black, I always, against those bishop e3, bishop g5 systems, I was very afraid to castle too early. So queen d2, the difference is compared to bishop e3 system here that black has this idea h6, and then he can take this bishop g3, knight h5, long castle. Even though, of course, normally if black would now manage to finish his development, it's very important bishop, probably he will be doing well, but he had weakened his position a bit, and white is ahead in development, so black has to be very careful not to get under some very direct, attack on the center and on the king side. I think Morozevich played knight c6 against me, which is not a bad move at all. And it's a complicated position. Let's say knight e2 looks logical, a6, again, king b1, for example, b5. A strange position. Well, I don't know how to assess it, and does it really make sense to assess it, because it's clear that black has his play, complicated position, full of possibilities for both sides. Something which I guess a Pirc player normally is happy with playing black. But maybe f4 is a move which, I would point your attention, especially players who are playing, who are studying this from the white side. I don't know why it's not so popular in bishop g5 f4 system, but it's very interesting, because let's say castle. Now you can castle because queen d2, bishop h6 is not anymore the threat. And for instance, if white plays queen d2, then maybe already d5 is working. e5, knight e4 takes, and then black very quickly pushes c5. So since now it's black who is having some development advantage, so then he can probably create his counterplay. Seems to be in time here. For instance, I think the main line for computers goes like bishop c4, c5, knight e2, takes, and now king h8, just trying to push f6, and it seems the position is very unclear, very complicated. But castles knight f3, and now d5 is not working so well already, because e5, knight e4, simply bishop h4. Again, some moves like c5 has to be checked. Of course, it's quite a direct position. So if black is in time to create his play in the center, he will be fine. But he needs to be sure that he is in time. I guess after c5, maybe d takes c5 is quite a critical move. Because with this pawn structure, bishop on g7 is limited, and you need to be sure that you will manage somehow sooner or later to activate this bishop. Well, I don't know if d takes c5, black has all kind of options. At some point, taking on c3, of course, white has some problems with the pawn structure, but also certain control in the center, and play, and bishop on h4 is pretty active. So hard to say, you need to analyze it. And if black is playing c6, okay, very usual standard way, of course, of playing is c5 here, but I don't know if after dc5, black has something to counter it in this particular position. And after c6, bishop d3. Well, you see, e5 is not such a huge threat in this position because black can always go knight d5 and so on. But in any case, white wants to castle, and maybe black will try to push b5, b4. Hard to say. He will try to find some play in the center, but it's not a position with a lot of theory. But something black has to be aware of. I mean, to know what to do against it, and something which is very interesting to investigate if you are playing white. So that is bishop g5 system. Again, a little bit underestimated in my opinion. But most of the players nowadays, they play bishop e3. So bishop e3 is white is choosing. Actually, it's quite a flexible system because he wants first to play bishop e3, queen d2, and then most of the time white is playing with f3, long castle, and then pushing the pawns on the king side. But sometimes, and depending on what black is doing, then he can change his plan and get to a more classical way of playing, like knight f3, bishop d3, developing and making short castle. So it's a flexible move, bishop e3. Again, knight g4 is not really giving anything because now you don't get this bishop, bishop g5, h6, bishop h4, so and then the knight will be kicked out, so knight g4 is not I don't see much sense playing it. Bishop g7 obviously is the most logical move, but I myself, and I think Alexander Grishuk, played a lot of a6 here. So you see black is also trying to be flexible, and his main idea is that if white is now playing, this type of game, f3 or queen d2 first, b5, f3, something like that, then, as I've mentioned earlier already, I don't want to have my bishop on g7 too early because, I first try to develop this flank and try to push c5. So like this, for instance, bishop b7 and let's say g4, maybe knight b6. Now black sometimes wants to play b4. The other knight can go to d7. So for instance, if h4, I guess, first of all, black already has b4 followed by knight c4, but even if sometimes he can do something like that, g5, knight f d7, and then preparing c5. So a very complicated game, but what is important that it's not so advantageous for white to play bishop h6 to change this bishop. But after e6, maybe now white can change his plan and play knight f3. So actually, you need really to get into nuances of the theory of this variation because it looks a little strange, because white actually is still hesitating whether he will play positionally or trying to play long castle. For instance, bishop g7, queen d2. So the idea is that if b5, then he gets bishop h6, e5 idea. So black has to be very careful about all those e5 ideas. And after castles, so white is mixing up plans. Now, for instance, bishop h6 is one of the main moves. And depending of what black is doing, if he is playing like knight bd7, something solid, then maybe white will start to push h4, h5 and long castle. Or maybe he will play in the center. For example, b5, a logical move, bishop d3. So you see, and white is preparing also e5 pretty often. I think for some reason knight c6 is the main theoretical move. And now black wants to play e5. And now there is a4, interesting move. Also e5 has to be checked, very direct play. I think quite a lot of concrete lines here. But a6 is definitely a playable move, but you need to know with both colors what you are doing here. Probably, again, now the standard way of playing for white is not that efficient anymore. So I would recommend, if you are white, to investigate those ideas with knight f3, queen d2, and trying to be ready to face b5 very often with e5. But let's say the main line is bishop g7. I guess also c6 move is possible. It's another way of playing. But again, maybe white can then try to move sooner or later. Doesn't have to make long castle at some point. So another way is to try to play c6 first. Normally, bishop g7 is a move. Now queen d2. Well, you can start with f3, but there is nothing wrong with queen d2 because knight g4, bishop g5 as I explained already, here is not so advantageous for black. And now c6. I think that, yes, as I've mentioned already, I think castle, that is really dangerous. Castle c6, for instance, I want to show you that one of the ways to play with white is f3, b5, and even very direct bishop h6. Of course, it's possible to make a prophylactic move, king b1, a usual useful prophylactic move, not bad at all. But even bishop h6, I've checked computer games here again, and it seems the statistic is pretty bad for black. For instance, queen a5 and even h4 directly, b4, knight b1, like this. So white is just playing for very direct attack, and it seems extremely dangerous for black, easy to get mated. Statistics at least is heavily in white's favor. So that's why c6, that's what I would advise you to play with black, is, again, not to hurry castling. By the way, I think this is f3, let's say b5. This is a very famous game, which I, of course, highly recommend you to analyze, to look at. Kasparov Topalov, one of maybe the best games ever played in chess. So you will get an aesthetic pleasure, also understanding of typical ideas of this position. But I have to mention that actually Kasparov didn't get any real advantage out of the opening. So objectively, opening-wise, even if he won an absolutely brilliant game, but opening-wise, black was doing quite okay there. So here, so c6, b5, and now white has a very big choice of plans. So he can move back to positional play, so to say. He's playing bishop d3, knight e2, a very logical setup. Just trying to castle. Center is, very well protected. But castles, e5. But seems to be that black has his counterplay also here, because, of course, it's maybe better to have f3, knight e2 than knight f3, h3 here. It's a bit more solid, so to say, for white. But from other point of view, there is less pressure on the center, and for instance, one of the possible lines is, it's just a complicated position, but one of the possible lines is, for instance, if a4 before knight d1, also quite typical plan for white to get c3, knight f2. Looks very nice for white, a lot of control of the center, but black has his counterplay. He can, for instance, play d5 or rook e8, d5, and again, it seems to be that it's very complicated game, but definitely nothing bad for black. It's close to equal. Maybe white still, because he's white, is having a bit of advantage here, but it's a very complex game. So another, there are so many different ways of playing it. It's not a forcing system. So you need to play it. You can play very different type of chess, especially with white here. So trying to play short castle, long castle, or another option is maybe even trying to play h4, let's say knight d7, knight h3. First develop, and then you see maybe g4, maybe you still keep the king in the center for the moment. So very complicated position. But if long castle, then knight bd7, and you see the idea that, since I haven't castled yet, so bishop h6, black should always meet with taking on h6. And now the thing is that queen g7, there is always rook g8. So queen g7 doesn't bring anything for white. And then black continues his play on the queen side, like, for instance, queen a5, king b1, knight b6. Again, b4 comes, bishop e6, quite some counterplay. So white has to be careful here. But of course, black also with the king on the center situation is not that rosy for black. He can also get worse. All in all, a very playable position, for both colors. So let's say that's why king b1, a very, also a typical prophylactic move in this position. So for white players, you should know that this is a move which very often is good idea to play this move. Black can try maybe queen a5 or knight b6 again, for instance. And as I give you as an option, bishop h6, takes, maybe a5, and just pushing pawns. Before trying to organize counterplay, there is no real mate very quickly. White is also very solid. If you're playing white, don't be afraid to get mated in few moves. It's not so easy for black. But it's a complex game, and for instance, now I can show you the main line of the computer. Here is, for instance, he's trying to play e5, sacrificing the pawn b4 now. A very important resource, otherwise black will be in trouble. And knight e4, d takes e5, bishop d3. Sacrificing pawns, followed by knight e2, and trying to fight against black king in the center. Very sharp position. The assessment of it is more or less equal. But in any case, it's so complicated that the better player and the player who has a better feeling for those positions probably will prevail in this game. So a very, very complicated, strategically complex system, bishop e3. From one point of view, dangerous for black, definitely. From other point of view, here, if you are playing black, you will have your counter chances. If you know what you are doing, you will have chances to win a game. Yeah. So, if you just like, I would say that this is a system which I can recommend for the players, white players who like sharp game, principal way of playing, something rather sharp, but at the same time, not without too many forced lines. Here, there are not really many forced lines. It's a complicated game where white has control in the center, so he should normally have a certain upper hand, in this position, certain advantage, but it's complicated, very complicated. And then let's now finally move to the f4 variation, which is, in my opinion, very, very dangerous for black. And if you're playing, black, you really must know probably quite a number of variations, theoretical variations to get out with a good position out of the opening. And I would even say that this is, in my opinion, this is a main test for Pirc defense. So I would say that if black is doing okay after f4, then Pirc defense is really perfectly playable. But f4 is a very serious test. And here, of course, the advantage of concrete knowledge is very important and can be even decisive. So the idea, white wants to get knight f3, bishop d3, 5. So white is, developing and stopping black from, realizing one of his main ideas of Pirc opening is, sooner or later playing e5. And also preparing the e4, e5 move, one day kicking, pushing the knight away from f6. So black has to hurry up somehow. Bishop g7, knight f3. And now black has an option, to castle, but maybe more principal is a c5 move. So it's conceptually those are two different moves. Castle, there is less to know, less forcing lines, but more problems subjectively. c5 is a very forcing move. You really need to know a lot if you play c5, but according to the nowadays state of theory, it seems to be holding. Even though white has a lot of options and, in all of those lines, you really need to know. With black theory, very often alone theoretical lines, but that's a very principal move. So let's start with a castle. Objectively, I'm not sure it is a move which gives black, enough counter chances, but of course, again, depends on the level, depends on how well prepared is your opponent. Definitely it is playable. Actually, in fact, very direct move e5, which is not so popular, but I find it quite dangerous. I would recommend you, with both colors, again, to analyze it and to make sure that if you are black, you are doing fine after e5, and if you are white, maybe just very satisfied with this move, so you don't need to look at any other theoretical moves in this position. So e5, the idea that knight fd7 was supposed to be main line for quite some time, but and actually now very dangerous move is h4, so very direct attack. White is starting to play h5, just trying to mate black. I think I had once a blitz game against Hikaru Nakamura, many years ago here, and I managed to win it with black, but it was quite dangerous. This position is extremely sharp. It seems to me that according to the theory, black is holding here, but yeah, very complicated game. So c5 and now h5 or even e6, f6, h5. So you see white burns all bridges and trying to mate black after gh knight e4 for some reason is computer first line. Well, this position is statistically seems to be okay for black, but you better study it carefully, yeah, with either color you play. Or h5, cd4, queen takes d4, knight d5, queen f2. Well, white just wants to get hg, queen h4, and direct mate, very quick mate, but things are not so easy. I think black's best here is e4, knight takes e4, knight f6. So of course black is trying to neutralize white's attack to open up some lines, and I think black is doing okay here, but very sharp play. But actually, after knight fd7, bishop c4 seems to be quite a dangerous move. And for instance, well, this has to be analyzed. Maybe black is okay here, but it requires really a very, very, accurate analysis. This position, I don't know if c5 maybe is even possible, hard to say, but the main computers at least are playing knight b6 here, bishop b3, knight c6, trying to play knight a5 and to take this bishop. Now, of course, this direct attack with h4 is not so good already because black can get bishop g4 and then press in the center. But strangely enough, just by playing a4, I mean, simply with the idea knight a5, bishop e2 to keep this bishop. Well, statistically, at least, black is experiencing some problems here in this position, but again, needs to be analyzed. And another idea is just to take on e5. Of course, if d5, this shouldn't be too dangerous because after queen takes d5, queen takes d1 check, somehow it's not very comfortable, for white. Whether to take king or with a knight, both moves, let's say with a knight, probably you go knight d5, and then white has a nice structure, of course, here, limiting the bishop, but simply black is better developed, and probably he will quickly start to develop his pieces, knight c6 and then f6 at some point, and which should be enough to equalize. But after fe, knight d5, bishop c4, now black's position strategically is quite dangerous. So you need really to investigate this kind of play, like here c5. I don't know if it's d takes c5, very principal way of playing. Takes, knight d7, then white is playing e6, and you probably will take on e6, take probably back the pawn, and then, it's a matter of tempest and matter of a computer analysis just to make sure that black is in time to equalize or not, in this position. But in any case, e5 is a serious move. I mean, investigate it, check it if you are white, especially. Then there is a system bishop e3, interesting system also for white, because the idea is that after c5, white wants to take d takes c5 now, so there is no c5. And he's playing probably just controlling the center and maybe trying to play long castle. Again, lots of different ideas for black. Knight bd7, for instance, is I just give you one of the theoretical lines here, queen d2, c5. Just to be able to take on c5, probably with a knight, long castle, knight g4, bishop g1 takes, knight takes d4, e5, for example, knight d2. Very complicated game here. It looks like more Sicilian type of position. Needs to be analyzed. But a serious move, bishop e3 also. The main move is bishop d3, and actually it is good enough. Also, black is experiencing some problems here, even though it's definitely playable still. So I think that there is some plan like playing knight c6 followed by e5. I never really had too much faith in it in this system. c5 is not working so well already because d takes c5. And d takes c5, this is castles, and you play e5, and it seems to be in white's favor. And this typical maneuver queen a5, which is working in immediate c5, fifth c5. Here it doesn't work simply because c takes d6. So that's why c5 is not a good move. The main line here is knight a6, a little strange idea, but black just wants to counterattack the center. Castle c5, normally white closes the center with d5. And again, it is playable. I've played it myself with black, and other strong players played it. It's complicated. You need really to study it. But all in all, probably it's not sufficient objectively for equality. And you have to be very careful here playing it with black, not to get, under direct simple attack. For example, one of white's ideas is just to get, for instance, knight c7, queen e1 is one of typical moves. And then very often white wants just to play f5, queen h4, bishop h6, knight g5, and easy just to get mated. Well, of course, for instance, e6 now is possible. White usually takes d takes e6. So that's why usually black tries to play bishop g4, strangely enough, to give up this bishop to make this potential white's attack much less dangerous. Still, for instance, if h3, maybe it's a bit premature to play h3, even though it's one of the main moves. Then you can take, the idea is that if queen takes f3, then black has knight b4, and because of the c2 pawn, then he can take back this bishop, knight goes to d7, and seems to be a decent position. And if rook takes f3, then black is trying to play for b5 or e6. These are the typical ideas here for black. So first he's trying to push b5, and then, for example, here maybe he moves to this e6, trying to play in the center, which is probably a perfectly playable position. So maybe then for white, it's more convenient to play something like bishop e3, first king h1, a lot of different moves in this position. I just show you how the game can develop. Knight d7, so black is opening up his diagonal, trying to play on the queen side. Let's say a3 just to stop knight b4, knight c7 trying to push b5, h3 takes, and again, black is trying to play on the queen side. White is just, trying to consolidate and having a center. But at the same time, you see that it's not easy to move the center, because e5, d5, f5 is weakening the e5 square. So the game is more positional. I think playable for black, but at the same time, also comfortable for white. So it's a game, complicated game. So all in all, castles is playable, but white has quite a number of dangerous options here. So then if you are not against playing black, and if you are not against of studying lots of theoretical lines, then c5 is much more direct move, much more principal move if you're playing black. And there is a lot of theory here. I will try to give you just a very general overview of it. One of the main moves is dc5, then queen a5. That is the whole point of the play, is to play queen a5, because after cd6, black has knight takes c4, using the pin, and he is doing fine. And if white is protecting now this pawn, like bishop d3, then queen takes c5, and we are getting into kind of Sicilian dragon type of position. For instance, queen e2, trying to play bishop e3 because white wants to castle at some point. Bishop g4, then black plays knight c6. After bishop e3, he moves his queen to a5. It's a playable position. It's quite okay for black, I believe. So nothing really to worry about. But here also, lately, that was the main line for quite a long time, pre-computer era. But now there are some computers that start to show some tricky ideas. For instance, queen d3 is one of those tricky ideas. Queen takes c5, that's a point for black. He wants to take with a piece, not with a pawn, back on c5. And now, for example, one of the lines goes like bishop e3, queen a5, queen b5 check. Takes, and knight c6, long castle, bishop g4. Okay, white has a certain initiative, better development, but structurally black is okay. And if he's in time to castle and not to fall directly under some very direct play with e5, which seems to be the case now. Seems that e5 is not that dangerous. then he should be normally fine. But there is a very strange move, Queen d4, which is maybe now the most interesting attempt for white. I remember I studied it a bit for both colors. Many years ago, so computers were pretty weak compared to nowadays at that time, and I couldn't really get to any final conclusion. Does it give anything to white or not? But it's a very serious move to study, to analyze. The idea is that if knight c6, white is playing bishop b5. Of course, if you take on c5, so white badly wants black to take with a pawn, to have this pawn structure, because then playing e5, he will have a central control. And for instance, one of the possible lines is castles now. Bishop d2. A kind of computerish way of playing. That's why it's been discovered much later, only, some 10, 20 years ago. Even though this line is played for many, many tens of years already, because it's really not a human way of playing. Knight c6, queen c4 for some reason. Bishop e6, queen b5. This line is, you need to study it, very carefully, and especially if you're playing black, you need to be sure that you are equalizing there. But it seems to me that it shouldn't be a killer of the c5 move. So then bishop b5 check, bishop d7. For quite a long time, it considered to be like only move here practically, but nowadays computers, I've noticed that they also consider knight c6 as maybe playable. So check it if you want, please. And of course, after d5, which is the main problem normally, even though d takes c5 should be investigated also, but I guess black's idea is to try to castle and, to play for initiative. So after d5, a6, bishop a4, b5, dc takes, and e5, knight g4. Very sharp, complicated, strange position arises. I think at some point white is playing knight d5, h3, knight h6. Position to analyze. I mean, this maybe it's more or less okay for black, or even completely okay. I don't know. Matter of taste for you, but without analysis, I don't advise you to enter this line. So bishop d7. And again, you should really check the theory here. Lots of different moves. I just show you one of the main ideas for white, which is e5, knight g4. Now there is e6 move, for instance. I just remember that it was one of the lines in old times, pre-computer era, where players wanted to prearrange a draw, and I think they were sometimes playing this. I think it goes like this: knight g5, bishop takes d4. I think knight takes e6, and some kind of bishop b5. If I'm not confused, something like that takes, and then some perpetual checks. I think there are like 1 or few hundred games in database of such draw. But I mean, anyways, it's. Okay, you need to investigate this position. So e6 is one of the moves. I think black is doing okay there. Another idea is bishop takes d7 check, queen takes d7, and now for quite a long time d5 was the main line. Very direct play, takes on e5, h3, e4 now is very important. Knight takes e4, knight f6, exchanging on f6, and it seems to be that black is just in time to equalize, even though you need to know much further this line. Then I think Alexei Shirov, he liked at some point, I remember, end of 90s, he liked just to take on d7 and then play, let's say, if knight b7 or whatever, he just would play d5 and play this type of position, maybe. Also has to be checked. But e5, knight g4, one of the latest discoveries, I think, here is takes, and play h3. A move which was considered to be, nothing special. I mean, again, but with computers now, they find that it's also not so easy for black to equalize. Here takes, knight c6, queen e4, knight h6, and now different moves like bishop e3, knight f5, bishop f2. So again, lots of direct lines here, because, the position is forcing. I mean, it's all about, you see, especially after playing c5, black manages to break white center, and it's pretty much all about very direct play, whether he's in time to develop and to be fine, or if not, then he might just fall into some very direct, into some difficult position, just move per move. So that is a very general summary of this f4c5 line. So let's now summarize. Let's now make the summary of this Pirc defense. Well, first of all, if you're a very solid positional player, you don't like complicated positions, you like your king to be always safe, probably it's not the opening for you. But if you prefer very sharp, complicated game and you like to have winning chances with black, then it's definitely an option, a very interesting option to have it in your repertoire as a main weapon or one of the possible weapons, especially if you are playing King's Indian, as I've mentioned already. So then also starting with g6 might be an option for you. And after d6, and knight f6, here white has an interesting move f3. If you don't mind playing c4 later with white. And after knight c3, g6, the choice is, again, depending on your style. So you have a choice of two major positional systems, two major bishop e3, bishop g5, two major systems which are much more complicated and sharp, but also I would say in a way positional, not very forcing, and one very direct, I would say, attempt to win a game by force. So to say f4, if you like this type of approach to openings, really playing the most principal lines and trying to pose immediately very direct problems to your opponents, then f4 is your line, and here black has to if you're playing black against f4, you should really know a lot of theory and you should be absolutely sure about this variation. So again, for the black player, I would advise you that if you decide to go deeper into Pirc, then probably you should first make sure that you are happy with positions, that you have something against f4 and you are happy playing it with black. I think everything else you will make it work in some way, at least maybe not to equalize fully, but at least to have a complicated game reach position. After f4, you must do some very work with the computer and move per move, knowing a lot of theory.